In 2016, a young South African sprinter named Wayde van Niekerk did something that had never been done before. Running from the outside lane 8 at the Rio Olympics, he shattered a world record that had stood for 17 years. His time of 43.03 seconds in the 400 meters wasn't just fast, it was otherworldly. But if you've been following track and field lately, you might be wondering where Van Niekerk has gone. The man who once owned the most prestigious sprint record in athletics has seemingly vanished from the top of the sport. What happened to the fastest 400-meter runner in human history? The answer involves a charity rugby match, a devastating injury, and a comeback story that's still being written. Wayde van Niekerk was born on July 15, 1992, in Cape Town, South Africa. From an early age, athletics called to him. While other kids his age were focused on football, Van Niekerk was drawn to the track. His natural speed was evident even during his teenage years. In 2010, at just 18 years old, Van Niekerk competed at the World Junior Championships in athletics. He finished 4th in the 200 meters with a time of 21.01 seconds. It was a strong showing, but nothing that would predict the greatness that was coming. The following years saw Van Niekerk gaining experience and finding his true calling. In 2012, he ran his first 400-meter race, clocking 46.43 seconds. His coach immediately recognized something special. The decision was made that Van Niekerk would specialize in the 400 meters, the event that would eventually make him a legend. 2013 brought his first breakthrough. Van Niekerk set a personal record of 45.01 seconds and qualified for the World Championships in Moscow. Unfortunately, his journey ended early in the heats, but this setback only fueled his determination. The next year proved pivotal. In 2014, Van Niekerk broke the 45-second barrier for the first time. The athletic world began to take notice of the young South African who was steadily climbing the ranks of global sprinting. Then came 2015, the year everything changed. At the World Championships in Beijing, Van Niekerk delivered a performance that announced his arrival on the world stage. He won the 400 meters with a phenomenal time of 43.48 seconds. The kid from Cape Town had become a world champion. But this success was just a preview of what was to come. The 2016 season started with promise. Van Niekerk opened with a time of 44.98 seconds, already faster than most athletes could ever dream of running. As the season progressed, he kept getting closer and closer to the magical 44-second barrier. The athletics world watched with growing anticipation as Van Niekerk prepared for the Rio Olympics. The Olympic Stadium in Rio de Janeiro would witness sporting history. Van Niekerk had qualified for the 400-meter final, but he'd been placed in lane 8, the outside lane typically reserved for the slowest qualifier. Most observers expected the race to be won from one of the inside lanes, where the favorites were positioned. Van Niekerk had other plans. When the gun fired that evening in Rio, Van Niekerk exploded from the blocks with a fury that shocked everyone watching. Running alone in lane 8, with no competitors beside him to judge his pace, he powered around the track with a rhythm that seemed almost superhuman. The crowd in the Olympic Stadium rose to their feet as Van Niekerk entered the home straight, clearly ahead of the field. When he crossed the finish line, the scoreboard initially showed his time as 43.03 seconds. Many thought it was an error. The existing world record, held by American legend Michael Johnson since 1999, was 43.18 seconds. Van Niekerk hadn't just broken the record, he'd obliterated it by 0.15 of a second, an enormous margin in elite sprinting. The young man from South Africa had just run the fastest 400 meters in human history, and he'd done it from the worst possible starting position. Van Niekerk was now at the absolute peak of his sport. In 2017, he continued his dominance, setting the fastest 300-meter time in history with a mark of 30.81 seconds. At the World Championships in London that same year, he successfully defended his world title with a time of 43.98 seconds. Everything seemed perfect. Van Niekerk was 25 years old, in his athletic prime, and seemingly destined for years of continued dominance. The track and field world was already speculating about whether he might lower his world record even further. Then came October 2017, and everything changed in an instant. Van Niekerk was playing in a charity rugby match in Cape Town, a recreational game meant to support a good cause. It should have been a fun, low-key event. Instead, it became the moment that derailed one of the most promising athletic careers in modern sports history. During the match, Van Niekerk severely injured his right knee. The diagnosis was devastating. He had torn both his anterior cruciate ligament and his medial meniscus. For any athlete, this type of injury is serious. For a sprinter whose career depends on explosive power and perfect biomechanics, it was potentially career-ending. Van Niekerk underwent surgery, which was successful from a medical standpoint. His rehabilitation was initially expected to last 6 months, a timeline that would have seen him return for the 2018 season. But the recovery proved far more complicated than anyone anticipated. Months turned into a year, then into 2 years. Van Niekerk's rehabilitation extended far beyond initial projections as his medical team worked to ensure his knee could handle the enormous forces generated during elite-level sprinting. The athletic world watched and waited, wondering if they would ever see the world record holder compete again. Van Niekerk didn't return to full training until 2019, nearly 2 years after his injury. His first race back came in February 2020, ironically in the 100 meters where he clocked 10.10 seconds. It wasn't his specialty distance, but it proved he was healthy enough to compete. However, the COVID-19 pandemic complicated his return to elite competition. With most of the 2020 season canceled or postponed, Van Niekerk focused his attention on the delayed Tokyo Olympics, scheduled for 2021. The Tokyo Olympics represented Van Niekerk's chance at redemption. In the lead-up to the Games, he managed to run his best time since the injury, clocking 44.6 seconds. The time was encouraging, suggesting that perhaps his legendary speed was returning. But the Olympics told a different story. Van Niekerk failed to advance from the semifinals, running 45.4 seconds and watching his dream of defending his Olympic title slip away. The man who had once owned the event was no longer fast enough to even reach the final. Since Tokyo, Van Niekerk has continued his attempts to return to elite level. In 2022, he ran his best seasonal time of 44.33 seconds and managed to get under 45 seconds in 5 out of 7 races. At the World Championships in Eugene, he even made it to the final, but finished in 5th place just off the podium. 2023 brought more of the same struggle. Van Niekerk ran his best seasonal time of 44.08 seconds, which won him a Diamond League meet. At the World Championships in Budapest, he again reached the final but finished in 7th place. Today, Wayde van Niekerk remains a background figure in the 400 meters, the event he once dominated completely. At 31 years old, he's still competitive at the international level, but he's no longer the unstoppable force who terrorized tracks around the world. The tragedy of Van Niekerk's story isn't just what happened to him, it's what might have been. Athletic experts often wonder what times he might have achieved if that charity rugby match had never happened. Some believe he could have lowered his world record to the 42-second range, a barrier that would have seemed impossible just a decade ago. But perhaps there's still hope. Van Niekerk continues to train and compete, showing a dedication and discipline that speaks to his character as both an athlete and a person. As the Paris Olympics approach, the athletic world continues to watch, wondering if the man who once ran the impossible might have one more miracle left in him.